Hi, my name is Tim, and in this video we're going to take a look at a game I played on LiChess.org. And so let's get right on to it. Alright, so I'm playing black against a player whose identity is Rentier, and my identity here on LiChess is Easy ASPI, or Easy as Pie. So white makes the first move, which is d4. Again, I want to stress learning the names of the squares. Every square has just one name. So we see this is the D file, right? Here's the letter D, so this is the D file. And this is the fourth rank. So the intersection of D and 4 is D4. And that's what it says right here. And the nice thing about memorizing these square names is that when I read, all I will see is this notation on a piece of paper, but I will be able to visualize the board from that. So I play n of 6. I play n of 6 to control this square here. They cannot play e4 with my knight here on n of 6 unless they want to sacrifice the pawn, but that would not be to their benefit. They go c4. So they're trying to maximize their control of the center. I play c5, which is a typical attack on the center. What I'm trying to do is to contest the center, their control over their center. And so this is important because if they control the center, then their odds of winning the game is higher. So I don't want them to have control of the center. I play c5 to control what gets set on this square on d4. You see, because this pawn can attack this square, this pawn attacks this square, and then they very often will push the pawn. This gives them more space, however, at the expense of giving up this control of this square, which was the point. c5, then I play b5. This is known as the Benko, and it's one of my favorite openings for when I play blitz, particularly in this rating range of approximately some 1700 to 2000-ish. A lot of the people that play d4, c4 don't usually play against the Benko. And the idea of sacrificing a pawn is what's going on here, because what happens usually is they take this pawn, and now I basically sacrificed a pawn. There are not a lot of openings for black where sacrificing a pawn, also known as a gambit, is a good idea. So this puts white very often in a territory that they are not comfortable with. And being comfortable with your opening can be very important when you're trying to save time. And we can see here that I'm just playing a casual game of 5 plus 0. That means sudden death, basically, 5 minutes each side. Right, so this is a common move in the opening. Again, because I know the opening pretty well, I just make the moves that I know, and that puts the clock on white. So again, you know, in a blitz game, time is extremely important. In fact, I have noticed that people who play casual games tend to think more because they don't care about their rating, a rating loss or not. So they will lose on time more often. And the goal for me also is pretty much the same. I'm not in this game as a casual player to win it so much as to learn from it. And this is important because a lot of people that play blitz chess have a gambler's mentality. In other words, they like to win. And it's this need or desire to win that rules them. And so they will play simply to win. And, well, isn't that the point of the game? Well, yes and no. So one of the points of the game that we're playing here when we play casual is to learn. So let's move on. Okay, so at this point, white is not too concerned about me taking this pawn, but it does cause a little annoyance, like, what is black going to do over here? And those little microseconds consumed by white add up, and they start falling behind on time. Okay, see the clock is not moving when I move. But at this point, what I'm doing is just going over the game, and then I'm going to select the analysis board, and we can see if my analysis of this game equals the analysis of the chess engine. So, okay, at some point, I need to develop my pieces, so this gives me a way to get my bishop out. My knight can come here. White usually does not like to give up this bishop. So when it comes here and here, I gain a tempo. He will retreat his bishop, and I will have gained time. Tempo means time. And in a sense, I've gotten a free move because he retreated the bishop. And so that's an important thing, right? When you're playing blitz, because people care about time a lot. Right, and that's what he does. He retreats the bishop. I totally expected that. But before I put my knight here on e5, I had to consider how long that knight is going to be able to stay there. Because all you have to do is push f4, and then let's say my knight goes here or here. If I put my knight here, will it get taken by a pawn? See, because if I go here, then he goes here. Well, we'll be able to talk about it in the analysis board. Let's keep going. So he takes, finally, he can't take it anymore. All right, so here's one of the ideas in the Benko, is now that these two files are half-open files, right? Because there's no fully open file. Fully open file is a file that has no pawns on it, but white has pawns on it, but black does not. So we call that a half-open file. Well, that was curious, wasn't it? Because what's the point, right? You moved your bishop out of the way before, but now you bring it back here to attack the rook. Did he forget that my knight is still there and I'm going to take it? Well, that was one of the things I wanted, so I take it. What's the big deal? Well, I'll talk about that more in the analysis. Okay, I attack that. Now, I know that this pawn is going to get pushed, so I'm kind of like provoking him to push the pawn, which may or may not be good. So I'm thinking that the computer may kind of be a little bit like negative about my putting my bishop here. And the computer may say, well, all I have to do is play e4. Yeah, okay, so you play e4, but by them playing e4, this square gets stronger for me. So I'm interested in seeing what the computer will say about that. And back I go. I go all the way back here because there's some interesting places for this bishop to go, which includes this square here when this rook moves over, which it probably will want to, so that it creates a battery with these two rooks together and attacks this square. And then we also have this bishop over here, which is attacking that square. So we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on this file. That was one of the plans of this whole opening. He moves the king over. Which I don't think is a good move, but this happens a lot, right? So people sometimes see ghosts, and so they make moves that they think are necessary, but they're not. All right, now that the knight goes here, the knight can go here, right, and attack this queen. So now he has to think about that. So I made my rooks become a battery on here, and he pulls back his queen. Another move I don't quite see the reason for. I come here anyway because now I can hop in here without worrying about the queen taking it. He would have had to back up anyway, so that's probably what he was thinking. Since he has to back up anyway, you might as well back up now, right? Now, these knights, right, they can be very pesky. And so when I say the knight can be pesky, we could also say that white moved the queen back, because when the knight was here, and at this point, white's thinking, well, the knight can go to e5, so I better back up. Well, he's backing up before I even make the move. So that's kind of an interesting idea, that we can get white to react before we even make the move. So the threat becomes more important than the actual move, in a sense. All right. So, okay, so he moves b3. Not sure what he's thinking here, because it kind of doesn't stop me from moving my knight here. Because if he takes, we take, he takes, take, and it's equal, right? But I don't want to go there. I want my knight here. How do I get my knight here? Well, by going there with my bishop. And now there are some really scary threats on the horizon if we look closely. Because if my knight goes here, that means that my knight can go here on f2. And if my knight goes on f2, it forks the king and the queen, right? And so that would be bad for white. Then they would lose the queen for the knight, and that would be the end of the game. Most people would resign. The only time that a person would not resign when they're down on material like that is when they're way ahead on time on the clock. And so, you know, they're looking to win on time on the clock. So they don't care about how much material they're down. They just want to win on time. Yeah, we kind of covered that point before. Now he goes here with his knight. Okay, so I just back up. That's not really doing a whole lot there. And speaking of knights on the rim, there's an old saying, knights on the rim are dim. And if you remember, controlling the center was one of our main ideas at the beginning of this game. And so when it's over here on the side, it doesn't, attack as many squares as it would have if it were on the center or closer to the center. All right, so there goes my knight. Now, the question he has, right, is where does he put this rook? Because if I take that rook with the knight, the term is we win the exchange. So he wants to move the rook, but where does he move the rook? This is going to cause him some time to think. Let's say he moves the rook on e2. Well, if he moves the rook on e2, I grab this bishop. Now he's down a bishop, so he has to take the knight, and then this bishop comes in and wins the exchange again. Or if he moves the rook here, it's the same idea. I take the bishop, he takes the knight back, and I take the rook with my bishop, and I win the exchange. Okay, so now what? He could put the rook here. Well, he probably doesn't like the rook there because I can bring this bishop over here, and now he's going to lose the exchange. So what does he do? He puts the rook there. I'm sorry. I apologize for laughing. But that's checkmate. It's called a smothered mate and was one of the reasons I wanted to make this video. All right, so let's see if the computer agrees with my analysis. It's hard to disagree. The game went well for black for sure. Let's click analysis board. And so this analysis board comes up, and we can go to the first move by clicking on the first move here, d4. And if we look at, there are different ways to do this. I could also turn on the engine right here, and it could show me, that white has the advantage here. I might click a move later. It shows that white has the advantage there. I click on a move here. It shows that. Let's go back to here. Okay, right around here, it says that white has an advantage of 0.3. That's what the plus sign means. If that sign goes negative, which it did around here, we can see some of the evaluations here in this column. It says negative 0.8. That means it's bad for bad for white. So a positive score means good for white. A negative score means bad for white. So the scores are relative to white. So that's a long way to try to understand what's going on. There's a faster way to see some of these changes in evaluation. So what I like to look for, right, is like if you're going from the first move and it's kind of in favor of white, at what point does it become in favor of black? Are there large swings in evaluation? Does it go from like a 0.01 to a 0.10? Or, so a 1 in the evaluation equates in value to a pawn. It's just a relative value. All right, so the computer analysis is done, and what we see here is a graph at the bottom after the computer analysis finished. And we can see here white is doing good. Everything above this line is good for white if it's above that line. And we can see those points, like that move there, has a 1 a plus 1.7 advantage, and then it drops quickly here. So because it drops quickly like that, the computer calls that a blunder. And then it comes up here and black returns the favor with a mistake, and so on. So from this point right about here, it's pretty much all over for white. There's going to be an easy win for black. So looking at the first few moves up here, we see up until move 10, everything was pretty much cool. Everything's good. And you see here is a question mark exclamation point. That usually means dubious. It's a questionable move. You know, it's not really bad, but it's like you probably had better moves. Indeed, what the computer shows here is this big arrow, and that is the move that it prefers over f3. Why? Well, because what white is, or the computer is saying, is that, you know, you have this extra pawn here. Why don't you try to do something with it, and just bring it on down here. You've got this open file, or half open file, and bring it on down here and get a queen. You know, easy peasy, right? Well, it's not that easy, but the computer thinks at least that's better than f3. And moving on from that point, knight goes up, bishop goes back, bishop goes here, and we see the computer thinks that's a dubious move. All right, so just because the computer thinks it's a dubious move doesn't mean that it's a bad move. That's something to understand. Now, if you recall from my earlier analysis, I was saying, well, why did he bring this bishop back here? Because he had moved it to c2 in order to not be taken by the knight, and now he moves the bishop to d3, and my knight can take it, so he's clearly wasting time. He had better moves. Well, what were the better moves? Well, e4 was a better move, for one thing. And that strengthens his grip on the space here. So now I take it, which, as you can see, the computer thinks that is okay, good move, or not good move, but okay. And then I go bishop f5, and if you recall also in my analysis, I said the computer will probably think that is not a good move. And guess what? There's a question mark, meaning the computer thinks it's not a good move. So the next thing he does is push the pawn. The computer says, yep, push the pawn. And I go all the way back, and he goes king h1. And also my analysis before the computer analysis was seen was that I did not think that moving the king over was necessary. And moreover, because the computer sees much further down the road, it even thinks this is a blunder. And my moves that I made later show that it actually was a blunder. But does the computer think it's a blunder because the moves that I am about to make are forced? That is, you know, is there any way to, you know, avoid this being a huge mistake? Well, not sure. That requires a lot more analysis. We have to do a lot more analysis on that. So now I bring this knight back. Now the computer gives that a question mark when it thought that rook b3 was a better move. Now I thought about doing rook b3, one of the reasons for rook b3 is to keep this pawn from going to b4 and letting white open up. You know, right now this rook here on b1 is kind of like not in the game. It's stuck back there, not participating very well. And that's another key. You see the arrow here. The computer is pointing this way, then the computer is pointing this arrow this way, and the computer points this arrow this way. So there are better moves for everybody in this position. So he moves rook e1. Computer thinks that was a mistake. He should have played b4. Now, the rook going to e1 isn't bad in and of itself. What really the computer is saying is that, you know, you should have played b4, buddy. You had your chance, and, well, you don't now. Why? Because we bring it here, takes, and I win a pawn. Queen goes back to d1. I go knight e5 again. He goes b3. He says that's a dubious move. b4 was best. So again, get this piece in play. The computer is saying you have to get the piece in play. You can't just hang back there with this rook. It's like you're down a rook if you do that. Right, well, I don't have to be asked twice to go for this square, which is where I'm driving for. And there I go. So if you look at this move here, the computer thought that was a blunder. What he should have done is knight f4. Well, knight f4 is interesting, but I guess the idea is to prevent my knight from going here. So if his knight were here, then he would just take my knight. Well, that's true, but I don't think in the long run he can stop me from getting in here. Well, that's a blunder. Checkmate.